Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Nimisha Jadon from School of Studies Environmental Chemistry, Jivaji University, Gwalior. Today we are going to discuss about a module Clinical Chemistry under the paper of Fundamentals of Analytical Chemistry. The learning objective of this module including the spectrophotometric techniques which are widely used for the clinical important analytes, then the various types of constituents of blood that are used for the analysis of other constituents present in either in plasma or the blood, and the immunoassay or the ELISA or non-ELISA techniques for the determining the various constituent present in the blood or serum sample. So first of all, we have discussed here about the clinical chemistry. In this module, we discuss specifically practical aspects of clinical analysis. Clinically significant constituents of blood and urine are described, including major electrolytes, proteins, and the organic substances. The spectrophotometric techniques are widely used for many clinically important analytes, and the multiple analyses are generally performed on an automatic analyzer based on spectrophotometric detection, and the specific analysis may require separation techniques such as gas liquid chromatography.
Here we are discussing about the composition of blood. The whole blood can be broken down into its general components as follows: plasma, which contains the serum and fibrinogens, and the cellular elements, which contains erythrocytes, leukocytes, and platelets. Plasma is the liquid portion of the circulating blood. The cells are separated from the plasma are centrifuging whole blood. If blood is allowed to clot, the fibrinogen is removed with the cells leaving serum. The majority of clinical analyses are performed on whole blood, plasma, or serum, and most of these use serum. Urine is also frequently analyzed. The analysis of some of the more commonly determined constituents will be discussed here, and the physiological significance of the result is also discussed later. Here in this table given the information of the pertain to blood samples for chemical examination. The number one determination is known as albumin. The sample is known as serum. Serum is used taken for the identification of albumin, and normal range of detection is the 4 to 5 gram per dl. For the albumin determination, the sample is taken is the serum, and the normal range is 4 to 5 gram per deciliter. Then the second one constituent is amino acid nitrogen, and the sample is taken for its determination is blood, and its common range is 4 to 6 milligram per dl. Then the ammonia is determined in blood in the range of 40 to 125 microgram per dl, and the amylase is determined in serum up to 150 milligram per dl. Then the bilirubin, calcium, and carbon dioxide content is also determined in serum in the different varying range which is mentioned in this table. The other parameters of blood constituent including chloride, serum, cholesterol total, cholesterol ester, lipase, lipids total, they all are determined in serum with their respective normal range, and alpha 1, 2, beta, gamma also the part of lipids, and they also determined in a same either in serum or the constituent is not mentioned here. Then the iron, manganese, non-protein, phosphate, phosphatase, sodium, sugar blood, and uric acid is also determined in serum as well as some of them in blood with their respective normal concentration range.
Now we discuss here about the collection and preservation of samples. Blood and urine samples are often collected after the patient has fasted for a period of time, for example, overnight, particularly for cholesterol or the glucose analysis. All experiments are designed to use commercially available or the synthetic materials that are safe, for example, freeze dried serum. The one experiment such uses urine, and that can be either your own from an animal or the synthetic. The hemolysis is the destruction of the red cells with the liberation of hemoglobin and other cells constituents into the surrounding fluid, that is serum or the plasma. If it is the concentration in the serum or the plasma that is clinically significant, then the hemolysis would give erroneous high serum or plasma results, as in the case of potassium, iron, magnesium, zinc, urea and protein. For this reason, the blood samples should be centrifuged as soon as possible to separate serum plasma from the cell. The oxalate precipitates blood calcium, and the calcium is required to the clotting process. Obviously the plasma prepared in this way cannot be analyzed for the calcium or the potassium and many other metals that are precipitated by oxalate, and so the serum is usually analyzed for these.
The usual practice in preparing whole blood or plasma sample is to add the required amount of oxalate in solution form to the collection tube and then to dry the tube in an oven at 110 degrees centigrade. By this procedure, the collected blood is not diluted. For example, 0.5 ml of the 0.2% potassium oxalate solution would be taken and dried for 10 ml blood sample. The potassium oxalate causes red cells to shrivel, with the result that the intracellular water diffuses into the plasma. Thus, the plasma should be separated as soon as possible. If a sample must be kept anaerobically, as in the case of carbon dioxide analysis, mineral oil is added to the collection tube. This is lighter than blood and will cover it. A cork stopper should be used in these cases because the oil causes rubber stoppers to swell. Sometimes a preservative is added to the sample, usually along with an anticoagulant. The sodium fluoride is widely used as a preservative for samples to be analyzed for glucose. This is an enzyme inhibitor that prevents the enzymatic background breakdown of glucose or glycolysis. The 1 milligram sodium fluoride per milliliter blood is adequate, since it also inhibits other enzymes including urease. Sodium fluoride should not be added to samples to be analyzed for enzymes or for urea based on urease catalysis. Sample can generally be stored for 1 or 2 days by refrigerating them. This shows down enzymatic and bacteriological processes but does not eliminate them, and so it is the best analyze fresh samples when possible. Samples are always brought to room temperature before analyzing. Freezing samples will preserve them for long period of time, at the same time suspending the activity of enzymes in the blood. The whole blood should not be frozen because the red cells will become ruptured thereby. Serum and plasma samples fractionate into layers of different composition when frozen, and so should be shaken gently after thawing. In the trichloroacetic acid method, 1 volume of blood serum or plasma is mixed with 9 volume of 5% TCA, and after protein are precipitated, the mixture is filtered or centrifuged. Both of these yield acidic filtrates but are useful for the analysis of many substances. When glucose is analyzed by being oxidized, for example with alkaline copper titrate, high results are obtained if the above filtrates are used. A PFF prepared with barium hydroxide and zinc sulfate removes most of the interfering non-glucose reducing substances. This provides essentially neutral PFF because the zinc hydroxide product is precipitated. The barium hydroxide reacts with the zinc sulfate and produces the barium sulfate and zinc hydroxide. Glucose is stable in a protein-free filtrate because the glycolytic enzymes are removed. A protein-free filtrate, that is PFF, prepared with barium hydroxide and zinc sulfate removes most interfering non-glucose reducing substances. This provides essentially a neutral PFF, that is protein-free filtrate, because the zinc hydroxide product is precipitated. Here in this reaction, the barium hydroxide reacts with reversibly with the zinc sulfate and forms the barium sulfate and zinc hydroxide. The glucose is stable in a protein-free filtrate because the glycolytic enzymes are removed. Now we discuss here the clinical analysis common determination. The variations or different procedure offering varying degree of convenience, speed, sensitivity, accuracy, precision and so on. The major serum electrolytes sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride and bicarbonates are fairly easy to determine. The metals are most readily determined by the use of flame spectrophotometric or the atomic absorption methods, although colorimetric methods exist for calcium and magnesium. Calcium and less frequently magnesium are also titrated with EDTA. Ion selective electrodes are used for the routine analysis of sodium, potassium and calcium. Chlorine is widely determined by automatic coulometric titration with electro-generated silver ion. The next is blood glucose and the blood urea nitrogen, that is also known as BUN, that is blood urea nitrogen. The blood urea nitrogen are probably the two most frequently performed clinical tests. In the procedure, the total of the reducing sugar is measured and so results tend to be high. But these methods have been adopted as standards once for many years. The enzymatic determination of glucose is an established method and dedicated enzymatic glucose analyzers are now widely used. The second one is the uric acid is the most specifically determined enzymatically but then by the described method. The uric acid in a separate aliquot of the sample is destroyed with the enzyme uricase and the decrease in the blue phosphotungsten reduction product is measured. This second aliquot effectively serves as a blank and the uric acid may also be measured directly by its absorbance in the ultraviolet region at 290 nanometer before and after incubation with uricase. Albumin and globulins can be analyzed by the same procedure as for total proteins after fractionation by salting out with either sodium sulfate or sodium sulfite. More detailed information may be required about the protein fractions, in which case starch gel electrophoresis can be used to separate the proteins. Acid and alkaline phosphatase are enzymes contained in the blood and are active in acid and alkaline solution respectively. The substrate used for their analysis is sodium glycol phosphate. The substrate used for their analysis is sodium glycerophosphate at the appropriate pH. These enzymes hydrolyze the substrate to release phosphate. Other phosphate substrates can be used. Barbiturates, which are drugs not normally present in the blood, are extracted unionized from blood into methylene chloride. They can then be back extracted into 0.45 molar sodium hydroxide as the ionized form. The ionized form absorbs in the ultraviolet region, whereas the non-ionized form does not. Plotting an absorption spectrum can qualitatively confirm the presence of barbiturates. The ionized form at pH 13 to 14 exhibits an absorption maximum between 252 and 255 nanometer, with a minimum between 234 and 237 nanometer, and at pH 9.8 to 10.5 a different ionized form exhibit a maximum at 240 nanometer. A number of the above tests are also performed with urine samples, and frequently the same procedures can be used. Because of different concentrations and interferences, modifications in the procedures may be introduced. Analyses are usually performed with a 24-hour sample, that is, urine collected over a 24-hour period, since the total daily excretion of most substances has much more significance than the concentration in a random sample. There is a defined need for point of care analysis for certain tests, those for which results are needed quickly. For example, the length of time between symptom onset and initiation of treatment is critical for minimizing cardiac injury during a heart attack. The emergency care unit is very dependent on quick blood test result to confirm a heart attack and render the appropriate care. Transporting samples to a laboratory to obtain results can be very inefficient. So, ECUs may have a bedside enzyme analyzer requiring minimal operation. A blood sample may be inserted, a button pushed, and the result obtained is less than 1 minute. One of the most successful biosensor analyzer is the blood glucose analyzer that is used by diabetics as personal monitors. The patient simple places a small drop of blood on a test strip, and the glucose oxidase on the strip catalyzes the oxidation of glucose to produce hydrogen peroxide, which is then measured either electrochemically or photometrically. Here is the table which shows some procedure used in the clinical analysis. For example, the analysis of or the determination of barbiturates is done by using the ultraviolet spectrophotometry. The principle of determining these subconstituents of blood is done by extractive barbiturates into chloroform and back extracted into sodium hydroxide solution, and then measure UV absorption at alkaline pH 252 nanometer. Then the second one is the calcium ion, that is determined by the atomic absorption spectrophotometer by using the method 1:20 dilution with 10,000 ppm of disodium salt of EDTA and measure the absorbance at 422.7 nanometer. Then the creatinine is determined by spectrophotometric method. Then iron is determined by spectrophotometric method. Then potassium and sodium again determined by flame photometer or some ion selective electrode. And uric acid and urea nitrogen is determined by spectrophotometry by using specific detection technique.
Now we discuss here about the immunoassay procedure. The immunoassay techniques are important for the specific determination of hormones, drugs, vitamins and other compounds of nanogram and the smaller level. In these techniques, an antigen and a specific antibody react to form a complex or precipitate. The immunoassay techniques generally involve a competitive reaction between an analyte antigen and a standard antigen that has been tagged for limited binding sites on the antibody to that antigen.
This picture shows the principle of immunological reaction. The serum is constituted with the plasma minus clotting factor. It is known as serum. And when the serum, the drug coated latex particle, react with antibody, then they form the agglutinated latex particle. And when this drug coated latex particle react with antibody and drug, then no agglutination takes place. So this is the basic principle of determining immunological determination of blood serum. Now here we are discussing the principle of immunoassay. Immunoassay combines the sensitivity of radiochemistry, fluorescence, or enzymatic tags with the specificity of immunology. The immunology is the study of antigens and their reactions with antibodies, that is, an organism's defense mechanism to foreign bodies through antibodies. An antigen, example a hormone, is a foreign substance capable of producing antibody formation in the body and is able to react with that antibody. An antigen is always a large molecule such as protein. An antibody is a protein endowed with a capacity to recognize by stereo-specific association a substance foreign to organism it has invaded, for example bacteria and viruses. An antibody is a high molecular weight globulin protein of about 1,50,000. When the protein exhibits antibody activity, it is referred to as the immunoglobulin. There are actively five major immunoglobulins in human blood, that is IgA, IgD, IgE, IgG and IgM. But IgG is the most abundant. The Ig consists of two light polypeptide chain of about 214 amino acid residues and one heavy chain of about 430 residues. These are linked by disulfide bridge into a flexible V-shaped structure. When treated enzymatically with papain, three fragments of molecular weight about 50,000 each are formed. Two are identical and retain the ability to bind antigens, hence are referred to as FAB, that is fragment antigen binding. The third fragment does not bind antigen by itself but can be crystallized from solution, hence it is called iron fragment crystallizable. The iron fragment is of fairly consistent composition and the fab fragment have portions of variable composition and will specifically bind to a given antibody. The key domains lie the terminal end of the fab region, that is shaded region, which form the binding site for the antigen. The iron fragment can also bend around so its end binds the antigen, but the fab is the main binder. All antibodies are similar in structure except for the variable antigen binding portions of the fab fragment. The antibody will specifically react with the antigen to form an antigen antibody complex. It is produced in the organism where it will remain present for some time. Only after the organism has at least one exposure to the intruder through vaccination, either spontaneous or artificial. An antibody is produced for use in immunoassay by injecting the antigen into an animal species to which it is foreign and recovering the serum that contains the resultant antibody, that is antiserum. The strength of the antigen antibody complex is called the affinity or avidity. Affinity refers to the intrinsic association constant between an antibody and a univalent antigen, while avidity refers to the overall binding energy between antibodies and a multivalent antigen. It can write the overall binding reaction as AB plus AG is equal to ABAG, and the formation constant is K is equal to ABAG upon AB concentration and AG concentration. The formation constants are quite large, typically 108 to 1010. The binding force are quite weak and van der Waals electrostatic and hydrophobic, but there are many binding groups. The bonds are broken, the complex dissociated by addition of salts or by increasing pH, temperature or solvent polarity. The antibody solution is initially diluted so that in the absence of unlabeled standard or unknown antigen, about 50% of the tracer dose of Ag radical is bound. A diminishing binding of labeled antigen when sample is added indicates the presence of unlabeled antigen.
All immunoassay procedures are based on the original discovery by Berson and Yellow that low concentration of antibodies to the antigen hormone insulin could be detected radiochemically by their ability to bind the radio-labeled insulin. The determination of unknown concentrations of antigen then is based on the fact that radio-labeled antigen and the unlabeled antigens from the sample or the standard compete physiochemically for the binding site on the antibodies, that is radio immunoassay RIA.
A calibration curve is prepared by using antigen standards of known concentration by plotting either the percent bound labeled antigen or the ratio of present bound to free as a function of the unlabeled antigen concentration. From this, the unknown antigen concentration can be ascertained. The slope of the calibration curve and hence the range and the sensitivity is dependent on the initial dilution of the antibody. The sensitivity is greatest with high dilutions of the antibody, but a wider range of antigen concentrations is covered when a more concentrated antibody is used. Also, as mentioned above, to obtain a very high sensitivity, it is advisable to use a dilution of antiserum that will bind about 50% of the labeled antigen in the absence of unlabeled antigen. This is because of decrease of 50% of the bound or the free ratio from an initial value of 1 can be more accurately determined than can be similar percentage decrease from an initial value of say 10 or the 91% bound. In the former case, there would be a decrease from 50% bound to 33% bound, while in the latter case, there would be a decrease from 91% to 83% bound. This is the curve of immunoassay calibration curve, which is responsible for the depend on the four parameter, that is zero concentration response, slope factor, inflection points and infinite concentration response. So at the initial part of the curve, the concentration sensitivity increases as the concentration of the immunoassay increases, and then it is decreases up to an when the concentration increases, no response was observed at the top of this concentration curve. The competitive principle of immunoassay can be applied to non-immunological system. Any substance that can bind specifically to a macromolecules can be measured using the principle of competitive protein binding.
Now we discuss here about the specificity of immunoassay. No antiserum used in immunoassays is completely specific for a particular antigen. The specificity is influenced by heterogeneity of the antibody and cross reaction with other antigens and the possible interferences of antigen antibody reaction from low molecular weight substances that may alter the environment of the reaction. A given antigen induces the formation of multiple antibodies and it will combine with the multiple antibodies to various degrees depending on the respective equilibrium constants. The antigen standards and the unknown should be prepared in antigen free plasma to swamp out differences in composition. The same buffer and the other diluent should be used, and if antigen free plasma of the same species is not available, then the plasma from a non cross reacting species can be used. Now, the next one that we have discussed here is the preparation of the antibody. The concentration of the antibody is important, but the main criteria for establishing suitable antiserum is its specificity and affinity for the antigen being assayed. The general method of inducing antibody formation is to inject 0.2 to 2 milligram of the pure antigen mixed with fluid adjuvant.
Now we discuss here about the incubation period for this assay. The time required to reach the equilibrium in the antigen-antibody reaction during the assay varies from a few hours to several days, depending on the specific antigen being measured. The lengthy incubations are generally not desirable, and the antigen may be damaged by prolonged exposure to the high concentrations of plasma protein, oxidants, etc. And so, some procedures may not be carried to the point of equilibrium. Then the separation of the bound and free antigen. The various techniques are used to separate the bound antigen from the free antigen after incubation so that the percent bound can be determined from the level response. The immune complex is a protein containing substance that can be precipitated with high concentration of various salts like ammonium sulfate, sodium sulfate, or organic solvent like acetone, ethanol. The precipitation is one of the most widely used separation techniques. The precipitated complex is generally separated by centrifugation, and then the level response is either of the phases can be measured. The double antibody technique is also widely used. Then a second antibody is employed to precipitate the primary antigen antibody complex. The second antibody is produced by injecting a second animal with a gamma globulin produced in the first animal used to prepare the first antibody. Although the use of second antibody introduces another source of error, the double antibody technique has the advantage of being capable for almost any immunoassay, and the separation is complete. The other separation techniques used included electrophoresis and bonding of the antigen or antibody to a solid phase for use as reagent. The next method that we are discussing here is the fluorescence immunoassay. Antibodies or antigens can be labeled with fluorescent dyes and the fluorescence used for measurement. This technique is popular because of the greater ease of handling the chemicals than with radiochemicals, and the problem of radioactivity decreases with time. The protein to be conjugated with the dye is usually a mixture of immunoglobulin and should be free of other serum protein fractions because albumin and other globulins label more readily than the gamma globulin and would render the method null specific. After labeling, unreacted dye is removed and the labeled protein purified using size exclusion chromatography. The fluorescence of the tagged antigen is often quenched upon immunochemical reaction, and the decrease in fluorescence can be measured without going through a physical separation. This serves as the basis for homogeneous immunoassays in contrast to heterogeneous immunoassays which required a separation. The next method that we are discussing here is the enzyme immunoassay. The tag employed is an enzyme, for example peroxidase, and the activity of the unreacted enzyme's tagged antigen is measured using an appropriate enzyme reaction. Again, in this technique, the activity of the enzyme is often inhibited upon immunochemical reaction, and the decrease in activity can be measured in homogeneous immunoassay system. The homogeneous enzyme immunoassays are commonly used for the measurement of low molecular weight molecules such as digoxin, then amphetamines, and prescription drugs. Enzyme immunoassays are broadly known as enzyme-linked immunosorbent assays. In short, it is known as ELISA test. These assays are conveniently performed by immobilizing the antigen or the antibody onto a solid surface such as glass or plastic particles. Centrifugation is avoided by absorbing onto tubes or discs made of polypropylene or polystyrene. These are readily washed and they absorb the reproducible amount of antibody or antigen. Small plastic wells impressed in a sheet are commonly used so that many samples and standards can be processed simultaneously. There are automatic pipettes and measurement devices that are used with these. If an enzyme tag is placed on the antibody, it is inhibited upon reacting with the analyte antigen, and in this case we have a non-competitive protein binding assay. In competitive binding ELISA, the antibody to the antigen analyte is adsorbed onto the solid phase, which occurs via hydrophobic interactions. Then a known amount of enzyme labeled antigen is added along with the sample containing unlabeled antigen. Following incubation, the wells are washed and enzyme substrate is added to produce usually a colored product via the enzyme catalyzed reaction. The maximum coloration occurs if there is no antigen in the sample to compete with binding of the labeled antigen, and this diminishes in proportion to the amount of antigen in the sample. This technique requires relatively large amount of purified antigen for uniform labeling. Sandwich assays are non-competitive, whereby the sample is added to the wells containing the adsorbed antibody, followed by addition of enzyme-labeled antibody, which will bind in proportion to the amount of bound antigens. The unbound labeled antibody is washed away and the solid phase then contains the antigen sandwiched between unlabeled and labeled antibody. The color produced upon enzymatic reaction is then directly proportional to the amount of antigen. Indirect ELISA, the sample antigen is first adsorbed on the solid phase either directly or via an antibody as above. Then the unlabeled primary antibody is added, incubated and washed. Finally, a secondary labeled antibody is added, incubated and washed. Then again the enzyme activity is proportional to the antigen present. The advantage of this technique is that a universal antibody conjugate may be used as the secondary antibody against all primary antibodies used from the same immunoglobulin class of the appropriate species. So, individually labeled primary antibodies are not needed for each antigen analyte. Indirect ELISA methods are also usually more sensitive than the direct, probably due to the binding of more than one labeled secondary antibody to each primary antibody, and non-competitive systems are usually more sensitive than the competitive assay.
So at the end of this module, we have discussed specifically the practical aspects of clinical analysis. The clinically significant constituents of blood and urine are described also here in this module, including their major electrolytes, proteins, and the organic substances. Some of the commonly used analytical procedures for important clinical determination, that is the normal physiological range of the constituents and the conditions under which they may fall outside this range, are given. Also, the sensitive techniques of immunoassay is described in this module, and the different types of methods such as ELISA, that is ELISA method of determining the constituent of the blood, and the RIA, that is radio immunoassay technique, were used for the clinical analysis and discussed here in detail. Thank you so much.